Thank you. Can we just take a second and recognize and appreciate Blue and staff here for kind of well, I'm really, really excited about tonight. We are making some history tonight. I'm not aware of another effort like this, something that attempts to make art collecting sort of a fun game. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background before I introduce the collectors and their choices in this round. I conceived of the idea late in 2018. So I started the group in early 2018, 6 years ago. But by the end of 2018, I was trying to come up with ideas that would take it to another level. And I don't play fantasy football, but I'm aware of fantasy football, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we had something for art that would be kind of like fantasy football? People really like it, they have fun with it. And maybe we'd come up with an idea. So I started to brainstorm and bounce ideas around and held a series of meetings all through 2019 and had intended to launch the pilot round in 2020. Well, we all know what happened, right? The pandemic happened, so the pilot round was canceled. Yeah. I had originally imagined this to be a social media fantasy art collecting game using Instagram, in which there would be a hashtag Red Dot Challenge, right? That seems pretty logical. And that collectors would have individual hashtags so that the public could search by hashtag to see what collectors were purchasing for their virtual collection over a period of time. Tonight we did this very quickly over 2 months, but in my original conception of this, it would have lasted for many months, and we'll talk more about that later. So it was supposed to be a public engagement rather than a private one. There are several collectors here, 3 collectors here, who have been working on this for the last couple months. We'll talk about that in a minute. So by fall of last year, when I was looking ahead to the exhibitions that were coming up, I realized that there were going to be many large exhibitions, 400 works in one venue. At Main Street Arts in Clifton Springs, they have about 300 works. In Rochester, there were thousands of works for sale. So I think, Lou, in part, some of the fall off in sales is that there are a lot of works for sale this year that were not available in prior years. Lumiere, which is a French company, had 300 works at their show. So there's a lot. I thought, you know what, this could be the perfect time. Let me quickly launch the Red Dot Challenge now, because in a compressed period, people can go to just a few places and see thousands of works. So that was why I decided to do it now. But why do the game at all? Apart from, I just think it's a cool idea. Well, there are a lot of practical reasons why people don't buy more art. And there are some of them pretty obvious, like money. You know, not everyone has the resources to purchase work. And a lot of young people can't purchase work because it's just not in the budget. And they also move a bunch of times, so putting nails on their apartment wall, and then if they move after a year, or maybe they are rooming with somebody and the roommate doesn't like them, and it just isn't practical for them. And for older folks, they're downsizing. So the notion of adding more work into the collection is really contrary to where they are with their life. They're about to go into something smaller, and so they just really can't do it. But I thought, if we remove the limitations, if we say, you don't have to take money out of your pocket to do this, we're going to give you a fantasy budget, that would allow opportunity for people to engage in the act of collecting without necessarily having the burdens of finding a place for their house or having to pay for it out of their, take away money from their rent money or their budget and so forth. And, but also, by removing limitations, I wanted to impose some discipline. Because when you think about it, when you spend your money, it is an inherent discipline, right? You only have a certain amount of money in your life, no matter who you are. Even if you're Jeff Bezos, you still have some limitations. And that discipline forces you to engage with the work and consider the work in a way that just casual looking doesn't, right? So if you have a limited amount of resources and you've got thousands to choose from, which one do you choose? And I have to tell you, for me this time of year is really stressful because I want to buy a lot, but like everybody else, I can't buy a lot. But there's so much good work.
Yeah.
So it really is, it's an interesting time of year to look because there is an abundance to see. So discipline enforces the kind of engagement you wouldn't otherwise have, but the game also models a particular kind of behavior, sort of a good practices behavior. So let me describe the rules of the game. Each player gets a fantasy budget of $10,000 in the pilot round. This wouldn't necessarily be the case we're going to do a quick flash round today. But in this round, they each got $10,000. And they had from December 1st until yesterday to compile their collections. They had 2 months to do this. They could have as many works as they could afford with their budget. So 10,000, they had to buy at least 7 works, but they could have many more than that if they chose to, no less than 7. Because I didn't want someone to go out and buy 1 piece and say, I'm done. And that's not really a collection anyway, right? I wanted people to have a number of pieces that they could then maybe tell a little story about what they chose and why they chose it. They had to go to public venues. So they had to come to a place like Rochester Contemporary, Main Street Arts, Lumiere, or other venues, or coffee shops. Anywhere work was in the public domain, and the price was available in the public domain. So it's right next to the work, or it's in the price list, that had to be public. And for the purposes of the game, there was no negotiation. Whatever the price on the wall is or on the price list, that was the price you had to use for the budget. So you can't like, oh, I called the artist up and the artist said they would take less. That was not, that's by the way, we don't consider that generally good behavior for collectors anyway. But for the purpose of the game, we wanted people to have this public relationship with where they're looking for art. I'm an art collector nerd. I love looking at art. If you don't like looking at art, the game is not for you, because you are required to go in person to venues. It's not an online game. You don't do it virtually. You have to go to the venue, and the way you acquire work for the collection is you are present in the space, you take a picture of the work in context, and you take a picture of the price. It doesn't count if you go online and just grab it, get a screenshot. So you gotta look in person, see the work in real life, and take a picture of it to acquire the work. Right? So that's the basic idea. Any questions about the general rules of the game? Yeah?
The artists all allow photographs of their work?
Well, the venue will make a choice on that, right? Typically, the venue decides whether it's possible to do that. So if the venue says no, then obviously they can't be included in the game. But I don't know that. Did you ever encounter a venue that said no? That's pretty common these days. I'm only aware of one venue in Rochester who, when I tried to take a picture, said no and scolded me. There is a long-standing commercial gallery in Rochester that will not allow photographs in their space. But it's not common. Even when you go to Blues, you can take pictures. Really, it's virtually everywhere. Any other questions? All right. So those are the rules of the game. You take a picture. I provided people with a dedicated online folder to collect their final decisions. They had to track their own budgets. Now we're going to go ahead and do the big reveal. So when I say that, I mean we're going to ask the collectors to review with us what they chose, and maybe a little bit about why they chose it, and I'm going to ask them some questions too as we go around. The first player, the first collector, if you will, chose to do this as a couple, which I thought was really interesting. I suggested then they might want to do it separately and then compare and see if, it's sort of like a dating game contest. Could they? But in this case, they're going to see if they must have agreed at some level. So the first group, here's the reveal, is Susan Mandel and Seth Ozier. So Seth, I'm going to go ahead and cycle through. So I'm going to show the works, and if you want to, just take a minute and talk about it. They chose 9 works for their collection, and they found them at 2 venues.